Hello and welcome to another in the series from Southwest Grid in Conversation. Today I'm joined by my colleague Sgt Steve Shepherd from Devon and Cornwall Police, a serving police officer who works with us on our team, to talk about the role of law enforcement when it comes to online issues. Steve, welcome. Thanks very much for spending the time with us today.
Nice to be here.
Look, we're aware of plenty of things that happen online, and sometimes it's very difficult to be able to draw the line, or for people to understand the line between what is just unethical, what might be inappropriate, and what is illegal. What laws are in place at the moment that are relevant to this to protect people? And the first question perhaps might be, do police officers take this as seriously as incidents that happen within the physical environment if they're happening online?
I think they do, and I think you have to understand that everything that comes across the police services systems is evaluated under something called threat, risk and harm.
Right.
So anything that comes across, whether it's a physical crime or a digital crime, what they will look at is what is the threat, what's the risk to the person, and what's the likely harm to that person. And that will then balance where that inquiry will potentially sit.
So once they've done that triage and they've rated this thing, or wherever it's happening, do the police have the capability? Well, there's two things. Do the police have the capability, and do they have the capacity to be able to address these things with the intention perhaps that they deserve?
So I think that there are some fantastic specialist units out there that most definitely have the capabilities with the technical expertise.
So within Devon and Cornwall,
you're talking about things like the high-tech crime unit,
yeah.
and things like that. People that can forensically examine equipment and things like that.
Based at Ashburton in Devon, where you can't get a mobile phone signal.
Absolutely. and there's a good reason for that sometimes as well. But if you're talking about when you walk into a police station, maybe with a lower level crime, that's where at the moment capacity and technology actually lets down the police service.
So that's interesting, because that might very well be first point of contact. You know, if they're not phoning, you have to remind me of the numbers here. Is it 911?
101.
That's the fella.
101.
Yeah. So 101 is the police inquiry to report stuff.
That's for a non-urgent inquiry, yes.
Because that would be the route through which the first appearance of these things might come, unless they've been detected and it's come to the police attention another route. Yeah. Is that a barrier for this stuff to be taken seriously in the same way?
And I think what you've got to remember is when you do ring that number, what you're talking to is a support member of staff who is primarily there to take down the information so that it can then be triaged and passed on. So you are not going to get the expertise necessarily with that crime, and you may get someone who isn't actually technologically aware of what's going on in some of the systems that you may be talking about.
Or may be able to evaluate it
absolutely.
in the way that deserves to. So, you know, in your own role, Steve, and whereabouts is your patch at the moment? Is it all over Devon and Cornwall?
Yeah, so I mean, I work alongside the UK Safer Internet Centre and Southwest Grid for Learning with you guys, helping out on the helpline and things like that. I also assist Devon and Cornwall Police with some of their digital tasks as well and get involved. So yeah, I'm covering the whole of Devon and Cornwall at the moment.
Wow. And when you were out there on the beat and doing your stuff, that was Torbay, was it? Right?
That was Torbay.
Beautiful Torbay.
It is. It's glorious. It's absolutely lovely.
So your own observations, how often did this stuff cross your radar when you weren't directly involved with the digital aspect? So when you were not that you're not now, but a jobbing copper out there dealing with the sharp end of this stuff and dealing with people, how often did it cross your radar?
So digitally, I think pretty much every crime that we come across, and that includes physical crimes on the street.
Just explain that bit.
So simply, so you think about maybe domestic assaults, abuse, neighbour disputes, all those sort of things. They all now have some form of digital element on them. Harassment and all those things is now done digitally, so everybody's on some social media platform having a go at someone else.
Can you give an example of one perhaps that you've, without the names or the details, just one that you dealt with?
So I'm thinking now of a neighbourly dispute over a boundary.
Right.
And that's what it was. And that actually in itself wasn't a criminal offence. But these neighbours had caused so much problems between themselves, and then that had spread out to the street, that the whole street was now involved.
Via Facebook or something like that?
Via Facebook, on a nice little chat group. They'd had their own page set up. There were insults coming from one side to and it was just escalating.
So how do you
all
deal
the
with
time.
that then?
And that's the really difficult bit, because at the end of the day, the threat, the risk and the harm there is fairly minimal. And so what you're seeing is that we can't go and interrogate phones, we can't start taking thousands of chat logs or anything like that. And actually what we have to do at that point is actually concentrate on the humans behind the technology and try and put the technology to one side. Which can be a bit difficult, especially if you're a victim or something like that, because you want to show us.
So that's a really interesting actually observation, isn't it, or aspect of it, that when people think of online behaviours in the police, they think of the obvious stuff that's connected directly with technology that breaks the law. So child sexual exploitation, grooming, online sexual predation, all sexting, all of those things. And yet, as a police officer, you're dealing with technology all the time. In most of the cases that you're dealing with, there is a way, as a technology is a platform to sustain it or to exaggerate it or accelerate it.
Yeah. But it's the humans behind it that are still doing that, and that's the point you can do. If you can deal with the human and the behaviour behind it, then it doesn't matter what the technology is or what the platform is or anything like that. You can stop that particular offence from carrying on further because you've dealt with the human.
So many of the laws that are currently in place have a long legacy and have been in place for a long time, well before the old internet was invented. Are they still fit for purpose, or are we seeing the requirement to be able to adjust some of these laws to make them more relevant for the 21st century and digital users?
So personally, I think most of the laws need looking at as a matter of urgency to update them for the world that we live in now.
Yeah.
What we are trying to do is we're trying to adapt laws that were made in, like say, 1978.
Can you give an example?
So that's looking at sexting and things like that. You know, we're applying those types of laws to children sending each other pictures.
They weren't designed to do that.
And they just weren't designed to that. They were there to fill a gap in something that was happening in 1978, you know, where children could be photographed by photographers and they could print them and distribute them and share them and put them in magazines.
And we still use that language, don't we? We still have making, distributing.
Absolutely.
Which isn't really... So let's take sexting as an example. You knew that in a talk about the law of technology of children, we'd have to come to sexting. So let's focus on that as an example. So it is illegal, is it not? Do you just want to explain the law in terms of and how it relates to sexting images? Any image of somebody that's self-taken or...
Yeah, so under 18, yes. Usually, and again, it's one of those, it's all in context, so it depends what that picture is, but generally nude, semi-nude, sexualised photo. If you make it, so that's taking a picture, that's what making it. And if you possess it, well, if you've taken a picture of yourself and it's on your device, you're in possession. If you distribute it, well, that would mean sending it off to other people, yes. And you're not allowed to advertise that you've got it either. That's just a little clause. All right. So don't advertise that you've got these things.
I've got these pictures on my phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're interested in purchasing them, that was an interesting, because that came up in Plymouth, wasn't it? There were kids who were taking pictures and had a business behind it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these were kids.
Yeah. Absolutely,
they were kids,
and it's that balance, isn't it? And it's finding where that is. But you've got children out there with hormones kicking in, exploring sex, exploring sexuality. They've got this wonderful device in their pocket now. Take a picture of yourself, send it to anybody, and you've got this law going up against that in 1978. And let's face it, that law is there to protect children,
but not to criminalise them.
Yeah. And we just haven't adapted it or looked at it thoroughly enough in what we do now.
So what's happened since sort of recently in terms of sexting and the police's view around it? So we have this phrase, don't we, Outcome 21, that people might have heard or know about. Just explain a little bit about what that is.
So basically the service itself across the UK has really quickly identified that that law probably isn't quite fit for purpose. And although we are duty bound, no matter what happens, if somebody tells us about one of those incidents, we have to record it. It's actually how we deal with it afterwards.
So by recording it, you mean it's recorded on a computer system?
Yeah, it's on a computer
against
system.
Against whose name?
And that all depends what's going on. But if you just took the example of two people, one taking a picture and then sending it to their, I don't know, significant other, that would be making a picture and possessing it for one of them, and the other one would be in possession of it.
So
potentially,
there's
potentially you could have two people on that record.
And what does that do? That means, to a certain extent, that people are reluctant then to go and report this to police because they don't want to have, essentially, what you're saying is a not a criminal record,
not a criminal record,
it's a record,
but there will be a record,
it's a record,
and it will be there forever. It is as simple as that.
And how does that affect people if it's happened like that? How has it? You know?
So we don't really know at the moment, and I think time is only going to tell. So we have this thing called Outcome 21, which you've already referenced, and that is basically where we can get to a crime and we can make sure those children are safeguarded, and that's the priority now. The priority now is not about criminalising anyone. It's about, especially with children, it's about safeguarding them. Have we done absolutely everything?
Yeah.
Have we educated them?
Yeah.
Have we made sure that those pictures are now off? Have we made sure they can't go any further?
Yeah.
That's the priority. And up till now, if you didn't have Outcome 21, even if that crime was recorded as what they call NFA, no further action, on an enhanced DBS check later on in life, that would still flag up.
So here's the example, you know, somebody does something stupid when they're 16, regrets it, it all gets sorted out, but it's passed through the police.
Yeah.
And then they go for a job, 18, 19, 20, 21, to work with children. And an enhanced check is done on them prior to employment, or prior to even interview in some cases, prior to employment, and it's flagged up that they were. And the detail on there won't give any context to it. It will just say,
and that's the trouble.
Child sexual abuse images.
Yeah, and it will say making, possessing, or distributing. And you could imagine if that's a child.
Slightly exaggerated, isn't
Absolutely.
it? So, but we've seen some movement, haven't we?
So we have. So Outcome 21 has come in. So as long as the police are satisfied that all the safeguarding's done, there's no extra concerns or safeguarding. They can now put Outcome 21 at the end of the crime, and it should not be reflected in an enhanced DBS. We say it shouldn't because it's always down to computers and it's always down to human error as well. And I think we are going to see somewhere down the future people actually coming back to the police service and the disclosure and barring service and saying to them, actually,
that should have been covered by Outcome 21.
That should have been covered by Outcome 21.
Yeah. So again, we don't know how that's
we don't know,
but it's worth bearing in mind.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got children as young as 12 at the moment that are having these crimes recorded against them.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to take them another 10, 12, maybe 15 years before they get enhanced DBS. We don't know what effect that's going to have. Okay,
so that's sexting and that's sort of self-generated stuff. So one of the really high impact, but I would suggest low frequency, but you might tell me different, is online child sexual predation and grooming. Is that still something that we should be concerned about?
So when you look at the threat, risk and harm, that is probably raising the scale a lot. So when it comes to how we take these crimes seriously, on the threat, risk and harm model, something like, online predators would
set all the
alarm bells off and everything, and then you would be talking about devices going to the high-tech crime unit and lots of investigation, child protection teams.
A lot of capacity and all
of that, and a lot of specialism as well.
Yeah. How successful are those lines of inquiry?
When those inquiries go into those sort of teams, very successful.
Yeah.
Very, very successful. And we usually discover that where we've had one or two victims of something like that, we start uncovering lots more activity underneath it as well, and that's followed up. But that can take a very long time.
What about those caught in possession of child sexual abuse images?
Again, it will very much depend on context. So things like, what job are you in, what position do you hold, what access to children do you have, and all of those
severity of the images,
the severity of the images will always go, the number of images.
Yeah.
So all the images are classified, and the higher the classification on the images, the more likely it is that you will.
It's going to lead to a prosecution.
But I mean, even if it doesn't lead to prosecution, you know, there are offender registers where people can be made to sign on to try and give an element of protection to people, even if they don't actually go right the way through the criminal system.
Yeah. So, you know, that idea of you know, somebody who jumps the fences and goes and views these images, what's the message to them? Are they likely to get away with it?
It's a very difficult one, and it depends on a very much level of technology and how they view and what they do. But I think, you know, with the teams that we work with, like the Internet Watch Foundation, who make it extremely difficult, especially in the United Kingdom, to host that sort of content, you have to have some sort of predisposition to actually go and find that stuff. It doesn't crop up just on the web anymore very often. If it is, it's usually so people actually are looking for this stuff, and if you're looking for this stuff, that would obviously set alarm bells ringing for the sort of police service and other child protection teams.
How useful do you think it is for us as South West Grid to have a serving police officer on our team?
Well, I think
what are the benefits? I
think for the last 5 years it's been quite amazing, really, and I think it's been a definite two-way information flow between us, because the police service covers such a wide and complex variety of crimes, and you know, I really feel quite sorry for some of the patrol officers out on the street, because they're expected to know everything, and of course they don't. It's an impossibility, and that's why when you do get a crime into a specialist team, they're brilliant at it, but trying to sometimes get it there is difficult because you're trying to cover a thing. So having me here, having this organisation, having it attached to Devon and Cornwall Police has allowed us to not only upskill lots and lots of staff within Devon and Cornwall Police, but has also allowed you guys to see the other side of what policing is and adapt your policies and procedures and methods and some of the stuff to make sure that it complements. So I think it's a fantastic partnership, and it's been a great partnership for the last 5 years.
And it has for us too, Steve. It's been brilliant, and long may it continue. So if you're interested in more information around this, then please log on to the South West Grid for Learning website, swgfl.org.uk. Only remains for me to say thank you ever so much for Steve coming in.
Thanks, Ken.
It's great. It's very uncomfortable for me, a Scouser, sitting this close to a copper, but normally I'm just about ready to leg it. But yeah, I did. You know, you're quite right. It's been a great relationship, and it's great to have that expertise on the team. Thanks very much for that. And take care, and we'll see you again.